My sponsor is in God's loving arms. And many times he and I spoke together, reading how it works. I looked out over the audience and I thought, it would be nice to have Joe sitting here. He's here, but it'd be nice to have him sitting here. But then maybe not, because Joe brought me up to be what I am. Joe was one of those sponsors who was terribly honest. And I know that if he were sitting in the front row, I know what he'd say. He'd say, didn't you just pray the Serenity Prayer? And I'd say, yeah, Joe. And then he'd say, then what are you doing up there talking? Grace of God, a very, very merciful God. Al-Anon, the Fellowship of AA. I haven't had a drink since November 7th, 1972, I think, or 71. I've got this all written down, but Brian said he'd break both my legs if I ever used a note, so I'm a little confused this morning. I don't want to give you the impression that I'm at all nervous. That sound is my knees. It's not the speaking system. I really believe I fulfilled my purpose in coming here. At breakfast, a beautiful woman and I had breakfast. I was going to hold up alone in my hole and get into a whole lot of self-pity and ego and all that baloney, you know. I went downstairs and there was Helen. Spoke to us yesterday. I said, gee, Helen, I sure did need this conference, and I sure did need this beautiful Texas hospitality. And she said, boy, I did too. I said, no, Helen, I mean, I really needed it. And she said, I know what you mean. I really needed it too. Isn't that great? My, oh my, I've gotten so much, and I haven't given a thing. I did ask a few of you to pray for me. I want to thank you. One or two here and there, just to pray that I tell the truth. To those 500 that I individually contacted, I want to thank you. I celebrated my 21st anniversary as well. I did that with all of you here. Yesterday, AA's 53rd birthday and our 21st anniversary. 3 or 4 of the happiest years of my life. I have to tell you the truth. That's not true. We're beginning to fall in love again. It's kind of neat. I called my wife up last night and I said, babe, I said, I'm a little nervous. And she said, you'll be okay. You know, she said the same thing Brian told me. He'd been working on me for 2 days. Just tell the truth. And don't talk bathroom talk. I said, babe, I haven't had the roof of my mouth sunburned in the desert. I haven't made big salads with 2 trains crashing together. I just puked and peed a lot, and I gotta tell him that. That's my story. I've just kind of a boring, glum and dumb story, but I'll try not to do too much of that because this speaker goes out in the hall and you can sit in that cafe and hear that. I apologize to the people. The maitre d' ought to tell the folks not to order the omelet. I might make a reference to. And she told me to check my zipper before I came up so that I looked sort of well. And so I'm trying to do that. This is the third shirt that I put on this morning. Kind of get fixed up. I put my jacket on. You know what went through my head about 45 minutes ago? I put the shirt on, then I put the tie on, and I put the suit coat on, I slipped those socks on, and I looked in the mirror. It was kind of like, go get him at the OK Corral. I walked out my hotel without my pants on. I wouldn't have been much of a gunfighter, I guess. Isn't that silly stuff? Gee whiz. Just one drunk trying to help another one. The man said, isn't that all we do? One drunk showed another drunk where to get the bread. I'm so grateful that you people were around to feed me. But it wasn't always that way. I'll tell you a little bit about what happened. And I can only give you that on more or less hearsay. I don't remember much of what it was like. I got most of my story from the newspaper. And my wife has many beautiful qualities, one of which is a memory. You add a woman like her, well-educated, memory, and you put an overdose of Al-Anon into that, and put that together with a drunk like me, and you got a powerful lot of hurt coming down. Skinny little kid, born and raised in Minnesota. Always looking to fit, you know. I wasn't as tall as the other kids that I hung around with, and wasn't as muscular as the other kids that I hung around with. My natural biological mother and father split when I was 6 months old, so they shipped me out to this family. And my to-be stepfather someday was born and bred of a very, very conservative Christian work ethic. He wasn't into a lot of hugging. He was a very, very tall, gruff, big, bushy eyebrowed fella. And when he talked, I listened. And he didn't talk too much. And it was always, hey you, this, hey you, that. I wanted a father, I think, that would hug me, because I needed to fit, and I didn't feel like I fit in that family. And yet my mother was shaped by the loving hand of God, my stepmother. She spoiled the dickens out of me. I'd throw a tantrum and kick a hole in the wall. She'd be there with a plaster of Paris fixing it up. I scream and holler about not having a shirt to wear, and my mom sitting there ironing the shirt. Never a harsh word for anybody. I owe her some of my life. I had a neighbor, very kind to me. His wife would go bowling every Thursday evening, and he would periodically pour me a little drink. And it was really kind of okay, because I came from the family like Helen where it was okay to drink. In fact, it was expected to drink. It was part of your entry right into society. It was a very, very masculine thing to do. You know, a very, very American thing to do. Drink, fall down, puke, wet your pants, all those masculine things. And in fact, the same thing that little baby girl does right now at 18 months, I was doing at 18 years. Should have figured something was wrong, and I didn't have the eyes to see and the ears to hear that you gave me. About every Thursday night, from about freshman year right on through, I was bluesing Thursday nights, because that guy would keep giving me that drink. And I liked it. I really liked the taste of alcohol. I think I liked the effect that it produced as well, because I didn't feel like the skinny little kid, and I was pretty tall. And when I was later to go out on the dance floor with drink, why, I looked like Dumbo, the baby elephant. But you put a couple, 3 drinks in me, and it was Fred Astaire, Step Aside. I was just one fine person on the dance floor. You didn't want to date me, women, because that Fred Astaire didn't come out of me until about 3 hours into the dance. And you had to sit across the table watching me get ready for the last dance. My high school counselor asked me an interesting question. He knew I came from a tiny little town. I was a little altar boy from this towel up to this towel. I participated in the marrying and burying of everybody that went to our church. He said, you know, if you go on to college now and find the girl of your dreams, it's going to be difficult for you to reflect back on the possibility that God may have called you to the priesthood. I said, yes, sir. I understand that. Well, have you ever considered the priesthood? I said, no, sir. Do you have any plans? No. Heck, I had that old alcoholic thinking there already. I had no plans. I had a couple of ideas what I'd like to do for the rest of my life, but I didn't know where I wanted to do it. I joined the seminary, and for several years I took a considerable amount of training to become a sky pilot. Looking back now, I can tell you with sincerity that those were some truly beautiful years. They were rich and loving years. But prior to coming into this program, what it used to be like, when I look back on those seminary years, do you know the only things I could think of were those 3 or 4 times a year they would unlock the door and let us out. And we'd go nuts. Not all of us, just a couple of us. And we were always doing the same thing. Same thing. There were many times in my history when I think that if I were lucid, I would have experienced deflation itself at depth. I would have had many more humiliating experiences. But the elixir alcohol took that away. Because almost from the first day that I took my first drink until the day I put it down in November, I was to have blackouts. I didn't know what they were. Helen Hunters, you have no idea the fright and the fear that can go through a well man's head when his wife wakes him up in the morning, asks him where a 4,000-pound car is. The first time that happens, it's a frightening experience. Because I thought she was just goofing on me. I thought she was just joking. I said, "Don't, what do you mean, where's the car?" I lifted my head up off the pillow, and the little pillow monster hit me with a big sledgehammer back here. I looked out of the window, and someone stole my car. I was later to find out that I was just one of many prudent alcoholics. When you have a fear for your license, you just leave the car. You know, who knows? Maybe I took a plane down to the corner grocery store. I probably didn't have a car with me. The little things in life pretty much passed me by. As part of my life then, periodically as part of my life today. I was very much concerned about whether or not they were going to admit Red China to the UN. I wasn't terribly concerned whether I got to work at 8 o'clock or 8:15 or 8:30. I was told at times I had my priorities mixed up. I was to inform them that there are a few of us chosen. and given the gifts that I've been given to watch over Spaceship Earth. I didn't impress a lot of people. You can't do that with funny smells coming off your body. Left the seminary, continued my education, degree after degree. I say that with all due arrogance. Educated way beyond my intelligence, truly. I made an amend after I came in the program to all the Catholic high school children who went to school between the years 65 and 68. Because when I got out of the seminary and completed part of my education, I didn't know what to do with my life, and so I thought I'd teach. I was single. I left the seminary because I lost my God. Ladies and gentlemen, that principal appointed me the teacher of Christian marriage and religion. So I made that amend for screwing up all those kids that didn't have the foresight to think things through. I am not like some of the people in the fellowship. All of you people, you've been here with us now for 3 days. You've continued to hear speakers say that they've been early on burdened with the thought that they were unique. And you were sitting out there, some of you, knowing that you are unique and not relating to them. I am quite unique. You can relate to me. I had heard a lot of folks talk about never having had any good times with alcohol. I had a lot of good times with alcohol. A lot of fun times, a lot of joy times, a lot of love times. My wife said they weren't as much fun as I remember them. So there are two opinions on that one. But I had a little bit of fun. And booze, from the first day until the day I put it down, always did its number. I was to lose the liking for the taste of alcohol as I lost the taste for almost everything. But I never lost the yearning for the effect of alcohol. Absolutely remarkable stuff. God won't let me. Right this moment, as a recovered alcoholic, I couldn't drink right now even if I wanted to. That's how majestic and merciful my God is. But were I to take a drink this afternoon, something up here tells me that exactly the same effect would come about. It would remove me from your kind of reality and put me into my kind of reality, where I could totally repaint the colors of the rainbow, and I could put different faces on you all and different qualities inside me. It was absolutely beautiful stuff. There's no wonder I took to it. I also have a personal belief that there's something inside me that allowed for that allergy, that strange reaction to alcohol to occur in me in such a magnificent way. It wasn't merely that I led somewhat of a goofed up childhood, because I really didn't. lead a goofed up childhood, I guess. There was also something inside me. You couple that with a nutbag, and you've got the makings of a real alcoholic. A real alcoholic. Not almost alcoholic. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. That means you got to be a real alcoholic just for me. You want me to work with you, you've got to be a real alcoholic. Not almost alcoholic AA. That's not what that AA means. I worked with a guy one time. I says, you want to stop drinking? Because he come to one of our meetings. Or his wife sent him or something. And he said, I don't know, talk a while. Well, I should have stopped right there. You got a desire to stop drinking, then we can talk some more. You got a desire to stop drinking on a spiritual basis, then we can talk some more. But I told you I was educated beyond my intelligence. Huh? I almost slam a little sociology and psychology and philosophy and theology at this dude. If he don't get well, at least I'll confuse the hell out of him. Teach him to mess with us. Yep, he thought Alcoholics and AA there was almost alcoholic. You see, that fella never lost control of drinking. I said, son, you never lost control of drinking? You really believe you can still control your drinking then? He says, yeah. I said, well, praise the Lord. Get out there and have one for me. Because just for me, Alcoholics Anonymous is for folks that lost control. I was the kind of person that was powerless over alcohol and people and my own emotions and my thinking process. Lack of power was really a problem of mine. And so I could only deal with those fellows. Interestingly, I've also run into some folks that thought AA was anything's anonymous. And I love them. I love them dearly. And I know that our 12 steps work for daggone near everything, right? Everything, you know, anything. But the helping hand of AA for me, this AA alcoholic, you have to have drunk a little bit to get a whole lot of help out of me. In fact, I'm going to be honest with you, not only do you have to drink alcohol, but you got to drink a whole lot of it, I think. You got to put something into it, you know? Halfway measures avail us nothing. I put something into it. I ain't going to stand up here and tell you that I was model AA. I had trouble, too. First time I was asked to speak, interestingly, tells you about my lack of recovery at that time. You know why I had a real trepidation about speaking? I had a real hesitancy. I didn't feel as though I had a grand enough story. I didn't do all those crazy things yet. My wife said I did. My sponsor said, "Did I keep thinking that way? I'm going to do them." I'm supposed to tell my own story. I got married June 10, 67. Beautiful woman. Thought I was in love. She won't listen to this tape, so I can really tell it the way it is. She was a good little Catholic girl who went to a Catholic elementary school and a Catholic high school and an all-girls private Catholic college. Never wore black patent leather shoes. And the only sexual experience we had prior to marriage was when one time she showed me one of her baby pictures in the nude. You don't think that was hard work for this alcoholic? Huh? Trying to make that baby looking like a 22-year-old girl. I want to tell you I was in love with her, but I wasn't. I had the feeling, okay? I had the almost in love with her, but you people taught me what love's about. It comes from deep, deep within. And I wasn't capable of that. But God works in mysterious ways with wonders to perform. He was able to then, and he is able to now, take this clay vessel and do some rather remarkable things, even when my motives are bad. Isn't that remarkable? I wanted to love my wife, I think, when I look back, but I didn't. I just wanted to go to bed. You know, she said, you want what I got, and you're willing to go to any lengths to get it. I said, oh, some of us balked. It's true, like Tom says, we thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. I tried every trick in the book. Only way I could get things together to know woman, as the Bible would have it, was to marry her, and I did. And it was okay. I was later to find out that the horns in my head fit the holes in hers. Like an Eleanor told me, it was a real special gift that God put in my path. And there have been times in my program that I've had God working overtime. I've needed it. I'm terribly fragile. I want to tell you that he's done with me, but he's not. I continue to goof up. But the God that I found is so merciful and so majestic. He just embraces me, and that's neat. My wife is like that. It says in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that some of us were married to people or had spouses that had patience beyond understanding. And after I got into your program of recovery, that line came alive for me. I understood that as a remarkable. I took a basically normal human being and turned him into a screaming bitch. There was a time when I think she could have passed all the psychological exams that laid on the desks on planet Earth. And when I got done with her, she didn't know whether to buy peas or corn at the grocery store. I had her pretty well goofed out. I don't want to be controversial. My wife said not to be, and I don't think with this crowd it will be. I do have to tell you, because of her, she's not a co-alcoholic. I'm the alcoholic, she's the spouse. She's only gotten three things sleeping with me. She got 3 children. And lots of times when we were arguing with each other, she got a good night's sleep. And once in a while I give her a cold or two. But I did not give her the disease of alcoholism. No. She'd get irritated when somebody comes over to our house and says, "Oh, hi, Gloria. Hi, Chuck. This is Bill. He's my co-alcoholic." Well, I got to take Bill outside and tell him, "Hey, man, you can't get it in bed." "You mean I ain't a co-alcoholic?" "Hell no, you got to drink to get our disease." I don't understand all that stuff, because some of you might call yourself co-alcoholic. That's okay. What the heck? Patience beyond understanding, I guess. My wife and I had some good times. And then the good times turned to bad times, because alcohol was to work its miracle on me just a little stronger every day. I had some guidelines, by the way, because you see, when my biological mother and father split, it was because my biological father was an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. My biological father was the alcoholic that Helen had in her head. when she thought about coming to AA and knowing what she'd find. That was my father, my biological father. His zipper never worked because he's always wet, smelly. His eyes were always bloodshot. Hair was all disheveled, stubbly beard. He was a slime of a human being for drinking. He was a slime of a human being for doing what he did to the little kid. I wanted to fit so badly into my other family that one time that slime of an alcoholic came to my aunt's house and we were having a big family dinner, reunion kind of a thing. I took that slime of an alcoholic out in the backyard as a 15-year-old kid, and I beat the dickens out of him. I beat him up. I beat my own father up because I wanted so desperately to fit in this other family, and I didn't want him around. If you just be dead, I wouldn't have my head confused about who's my father. Just get out of my life. Don't fool around with this man over here. I've been living with him now for almost 15 years, and I fit. You're going to foul it up. God works in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. 10 years later, I 12-stepped him. And he's forgiven me. That's neat. Darn alcohol. No good times. The lying and the cheating. The dehumanizing stuff. And all the time I thought it was doing something special to me. And it wasn't. It was doing what it's supposed to do for just people like me. Not for people like my wife. She's disgusting. I don't want any more. I'm beginning to feel it. That's when you're supposed to start. Ooh. It's remarkable. I didn't know till I sobered up that folks didn't really drink like me. Not really. I didn't know what those other folks were doing. My God, I don't want to break anybody's bubble that's a newcomer, but you know that most of the people in society today will let them little hard ice cubes melt in a drink. Lots of folks don't even finish the darn thing. Absolutely disgusting. On rare occasions early in my sobriety, I would pour alcohol for people that did not have a drinking problem. And I felt it was kind of a disgusting thing to see. Either drink the damn thing or get the hell out. What do you mean you come over here for a nice, fun dinner? You know? Drink, damn it. I can't. Somebody's got to keep that brewery going. I'm out of action for a little while. Boy, you can tell I had it. Getting worse, getting worse. One of my rules was never to drink in the morning. You drink in the morning, you be like that biological father of mine I described. You'd be a real alcoholic if you drink in the morning. Well, I can tell you, with as much honesty as I can, that most of the time I didn't drink in the morning. Once in a while I did. If you're vacation, you might want to drink in the morning. Or if I was fishing, you might want to have a morning drink with the guys. Just a little shot, kind of get you going for the day. Once in a while on Saturday, if you knew it was going to be a hard day, cutting the grass or something like that. Later on I found out that's a damn lie. I didn't ever cut my grass. I made an amend to my neighbor after I got in the program. I cut the grass so she could find her kids. And an alcoholic mind is remarkable, isn't it? Oh, a whole new reality. Things sort of slip from you. I have to tell you this. biggest problems I had was what to do with the bottles. Now, damn fool's laughing, see. He knows. I come up with this absolutely ingenious idea. I told you I was doing a powerful lot of drinking. I'm back in Minnesota now. Cold, cold winters and a whole lot of snow. Right? What the hell? God's gift to the drunk. Huh? I go in the bathroom and I get in the bathtub and I open up the second-story window and I flick them soldiers out the window and they glisten through the air and slam themselves into that snow and God covers them up. God works in mysterious ways, wonders to perform. After about 200 or 300 of those things flying through the air and giving themselves a proper burial, God sent spring. I got up one morning and I got in the bathtub and I opened up the window and I looked out and oh my God, it was my whole backyard just sparkled. It was like a diamond field, just sparkled. I ran downstairs and I knocked on my neighbor's door and I said, don't you ever have a party and throw that shit in my yard again. I said to my wife, we are out of here. This is a low-class neighborhood. Strange, she said. They're all the same brand. And they're all the brand that I used to find when I was employed in this house as a full-time bottle hunter. My wife used to be a bottle hunter. Strange games I played with that one, too. Brian, I ain't ever going to get into what it's like now. I'm caught. I used to put plants. You have to put plants out for her to find. Not obvious. Under the dresser drawer, behind the closet drawer. You know, that's why I always had to have 3 or 4 jugs. 2 were good ones. 1 was hidden in a special spot. 1 was just in front of it because once she found the real stuff, she'd quit looking now. But early on in the drinking, I'd put plants out, and she'd find that jug and pour it down, then she'd be done looking. Later on, she realized I was putting plants out. They weren't real jugs. They were just colored water or just water in my vodka jug, you know. Ladies and gentlemen, Al-Anon found her. Until then, I ruled the house. Until then, I told her what reality was. Until then, I was able to seriously question her devotion to me. Sweetheart, says sickness or in health, till death do us part. Now, get off my case. At one point in my drinking career, after I'd be off for a couple of days, she would even bring me something home as a reward. That's pretty good stuff. Only after a while, I couldn't stay sober long enough to get the reward. It's like that daggone dog I got at home. It wants to pee on the rug. It's going to do it. It ain't going to wait for the little wafer anymore. And that's the way I was. Told my wife that dog has got a lack of power. Al-Anon was to teach her detached concern. Al-Anon was to teach her of a loving and merciful God. Al-Anon Even appointed her to bring a meeting one night. We were talking at breakfast. And she's a sharing kind of woman. She said, Chuck, I've got to bring this meeting on love or faith or acceptance or something. Can you help me? Sure. I got my philosophy books and theology books and psychology books out, and boy, we just had a remarkable presentation. Not unlike those I gave after I came in the program. That didn't work. And you people sat around the room and watched me give my presentations. And you did it with an awful lot of love and a little smile on your face until one day I was to quit that. I don't know where Al-Anon gets all its money, but in our town, they had an unlimited publications budget. In my house, you could not put on a suit coat, a pants, a pair of socks. If you were pretty well blasted the night before and didn't really sober up the next day, which happened to me many times, I was gone for 2 days at a crack. You'd be sitting at work about 11 o'clock squirming around in your chair, and you reach down and you pull a pamphlet out of your underwear. She went to a man as she started getting well, talked to him. I'm getting more and more nervous because she's bringing more people into this picture. I would just like you not to know that I drank. And she was talking to other people, furious. In my sobriety, I was still angry at my wife because she had talked to her mom and dad about me. A terrible pain inside me. That she would tell these stories about my drinking to other people. Not many. My wife wasn't a chatterbox. My wife never was, still isn't, into a lot of the touchy-feely stuff. Hers was deeply spiritual, not terribly clinical and psychological. Though that stuff is good, I think, for some people. It wasn't where my wife was to get well. She was bothering me, folks. I was no longer having the control knobs on her anymore. Every morning I'd run out to Kmart and I'd come home with a brand new shiny box of control knobs, and every evening Al-Anon would take them away. My wife is as much as a social person as the rest of you, so one of the things I used to do then on a Wednesday night, I'd ask her if she'd like to go out to dinner, and only on Wednesday night, mind you. Not Thursday, Friday, and the rest of the week, just Wednesday night. I eventually got her to go out to dinner with me once, really beautiful dinner. And then next Wednesday we went out again. Next Wednesday we went out again. And I got her off Al-Anon. Al-Anons are really nosy. Hello, Gloria. How come y'all haven't been to the meeting for a while? Told that woman it's none of her business what my wife can do on a Wednesday night. Well, we just love her, and would you tell her we called? Yeah. Honest Injun me, of course I told her. Oh, gee. Eventually, I had to damn near die to get her into Al-Anon full time. She went back into Al-Anon real strong, stronger than ever before. I thought I'd try another ploy. I didn't drink on every Wednesday night. She'd come home and I'd just be neat and clean and smelly. Didn't get rid of the smelly until I got back in the program. She still kept going. And then I tried that period of time where every Wednesday night, more than any other night of the week, I would be absolutely drunk, stupid, wasted, sickening. And she'd come home and she'd look down at me, and I'd look up at her and I'd say, see, that Al-Anon don't work. And she said, oh, yes, it does. Person asked her one time, when you see Chuck in the coffin, will you honestly be able to say to yourself, if you love him, have you done everything you could do to help him? Because he's a helpless little child. He is now totally out of control. He can't help himself. It appears that, doesn't mean to be too many human powers around that can't help him. You might be one that can help him had you done it all as you look at him in the coffin. And she said, no, I haven't. I'd like to tell you that I came to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous on my own power, but I didn't. After that question to my wife, she gave me a call and she said, Chuck, you know, you've been feeling run down, all that? I said, yes. Well, I called the doctor and made an appointment for a physical. I said, well, thank you. That's kind of a loving thing you've done. I said, but I haven't got a lot of work, a lot of time to run all over town for a physical. She said, oh, no, it's just a couple, 3 blocks from your office. Just go on down there. In fact, today he's waiting for you if you'd like to do it. That's fine. I'm at this time in my sobriety when all of reality is internal, and I am totally incapable of examining anything. And if I were, I'd probably be dead today. I went to that doctor, and I took a physical, and he showed me the consequence of my physical. Why, I had more pieces of my liver floating through my bloodstream that I did have hanging where it was supposed to be hanging. And he said, son, I think you ought to try not drinking for a week. And then you come on back next week and you tell me how you did. You know, that's the first outsider that ever told me that. But he told it to me in a rather loving way after all. It was only a week. What the hell? I can do that. But you see, my drinking progressed, ladies and gentlemen, to where every time I sat on the end of my bed, and that's the only place I drank at the end of my drinking career, I had to drink down a quart of 100 proof vodka. And if you drank that stuff, you know that in the twilight of your drinking career, body can't handle that stuff. I told you I was a puker. I can puke at will. I bet I could even do it now. Puked all over the world. I was to take that defect and turn it into an asset. I would take a little sip of that vodka, stick my finger down my throat, and I'd throw up all over the place. And when my head and my throat and my stomach were totally raw, then it could take that quart. And that's what my life was like at the end. I told you I didn't drink very many mornings. When you put that much in your body at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you don't have to know much about medicine to know that you're drunk in hell the next morning. And it was able to carry me. I did not drink every day. I used to say that all the time. Even in the fellowship, I would brag about not drinking every day. Put that much stuff in you in one setting, you don't have to. But when you come off, you got to get into it again. You got to get into it quick. I lasted a couple of days. I went back to the doctor in the end of the week, and I said, Doc, I only lasted a couple of days. Well, son, I think you ought to take a real serious look about whether or not you got a drinking problem. And he talked to me a little bit about this business of alcoholism, and I thought, well, okay. I'll go in. Can I go in like on a Friday afternoon, and Friday, Saturday, Sunday, something like that? He said, well, we've got some programs about, but they're not quite like that, though. A little bit longer. How much longer? Well, he said, some people look at it like a long weekend. The doctor was not bound by our program of honesty. And if I'd have used my skills, I'd have hurt him. I heard somebody up here say he was a liar. Brian says he's a liar. Even my wife will tell you I'm not a liar. I never told a lie in my life. I had a very, very funny way of telling the truth, though. That's what that doctor did to me. And he got me in that treatment, to make a long story short. Doggone treatment center. And the only reason I went there is because my wife was on a first-name basis with the county sheriff. And the county sheriff was the one that could write out those little pieces of paper that start with the big C. Huh? One word to me that was more terrible than a closed on closed bar was the big C on a commitment paper. My wife loved me so much, she was willing to risk our marriage to commit me to treatment. My last drunk, I don't care if I remember it or not. I heard some people say, you know, boy, don't ever forget your last drunk or you're going to have another one. I'm not impressed with that kind of self-knowledge. because all the last drunks that I ever had, I always had another one. But the loving God in this program puts himself between me and the bottle. I don't need that memory. I need it to work with others. That keeps me sober, assures me nothing's so vital to permanent recovery as that. I went out and I bought that bottle that I always looked at on the top shelf that Wednesday night. And I brought it home, and ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in my drinking career, I drank like a gentleman. I put the cork on the sink, and I put an ice cube in the glass, and I put the booze in the glass, titch-a-mix, and I was to have a pleasant drink before I went into treatment. On my first birthday in Alcoholics Anonymous, my wife told me about that night, one of the most insane nights of my life. A desire to take her life, my life, breaking furniture, throwing things around the room. I was an animal, an absolute animal. And yet, in my kind of reality, my last drunk was a pleasant drunk. Isn't that remarkable? I was so drunk the next day I was supposed to check in at 10 o'clock. I also had a whole lot of work to do at the office. I couldn't make the 10 o'clock check-in because I couldn't walk. I showered and shaved and cleaned up, and I packed my briefcase with all my papers and stuff, and I got my suit on, and finally by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I felt fairly squared away enough to walk into that treatment center and tell them, here I am. Didn't want them to know I had a drinking problem. What am I doing in a treatment center for alcoholics if I don't have a treatment agreement? You see, I am different in this respect. I came to the Fellowship Alcoholics Anonymous after treatment. Treatment helped my body kind of clean up a little bit. I had a great big tall banana for a roommate. I said to the nurse, where do I sleep? And she said, down the hall and to the right, room 202. I said, great. She said, oh, by the way, you got a roommate. Scared the hell out of me. Guy had yellow jaundice. He was as yellow as your shirt. Absolutely. Great big yellow long banana. I said, thank God I didn't drink that long. My liver being out to here had nothing to do with it. 240, 250 pounds of swollen up alcoholic cells. I got out of treatment. I got into Alcoholics Anonymous. One too long, I recovered from treatment. You got to do that. You got to do that. The miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous was to come to be. I mean, just in my life, I did not have a drink from the day I walked through that door with my arrogant, selfish, self-centered, conceited, greedy, procrastinating self. Well, I didn't know all that. I was to later find out about that. I was to find out that the counselor I had was a very, very beautiful human being. My counselor believed, this was a strange thought, my counselor believed that no alcoholic has to hurt anymore. That when you come to the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, or when you come to his treatment center, you've heard enough. You don't have to go on the hot seat, and have sick people screw you up more. You don't have to have knives going in and out of you and turning you. That man brought me to the level of wellness that I needed for AA to take over, and he brought me to that with love and understanding and compassion, but also with honesty, because he told me I never saw anybody too dumb to get the program, but son, you might be too smart. I wasn't too impressed with him. He only had 2 degrees, and I had a whole bunch. I let some of his stuff go off, but some of you people did not let me off like that. You kept moving and moving and moving on me. Someone told me about this 12-step work, and I was to do that. I really wasn't doing 12-step in my first year sobriety. I was sort of like a blue cab. I go down on 7th Street and I'd jerk them right off the bar stool if they were a little bit tipsy, and off to the treatment we'd go. And I'd come to my meeting every Wednesday night with a report. Got 5 this week. Thought that was 12-step work. All I was doing is qualifying for yellow cab. Gee whiz, but you people just let me do my thing. Those folks, they didn't get hurt going to treatment. What the heck? They probably needed it anyway. Huh? They didn't know where their house was. They were too drunk. I never took one but a drunk one. I make a mistake once in a while. He'd kick and scream and holler like an airliner, but I let him alone. I go after a drunk. Gee whiz. I went through those steps that you have. My sponsor, like other sponsors said, they're numbered because we're alcoholic, and that's the way you gotta do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not 113. But I wasn't too terribly checked out, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't mean to imply I am right now. You made that decision yourself just a little while ago. Damn fool walks out of his room with his pants off, there's something wrong with him. I went through the first bunch of steps to get the heat off. That's all. Just to get the heat off my back. I did not have a desire to stop drinking when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not have a desire to stop drinking in the first month, the second month, the third month, the fourth month. But around the 6th month, I went to either the wrong meeting or too many meetings. And I met your requirement for membership. I got an honest desire to stop drinking. And I started clearing up my brain enough, and I started doing a little reflecting, like Bill says, and I started realizing how powerless I really was over alcohol. It's true I didn't drink every morning, and it's true that I didn't drink out too many of those little bottles, and it's true that I didn't miss a lot of work, and it's true that I didn't go to jail, and it's true that I didn't lose my wife. Several years later, however, when I left that job for a job in D.C., I had to go through my files. And there were report after report after report with my name on them, and I had no recollection. And if you could call the relationship that my wife and I had during that drinking period, we didn't have any relationship at all. The difference between the guy that got a divorce and me, he's closer to the phone, I guess. That's all. That's all. Gee whiz. My life was truly unmanageable, wasn't it? I didn't know how to react to people, and I'm constantly trying to control and manipulate people, you know? And you people teach me what? Gosh, get up in the morning and ask him what you can do for the fellow that still hurts and just get out of the struggle. Huh? I mean, God will take care of it. Well, that's good for me to say now. But you take a guy 6 months in the program that is now beginning to be really steeped in the notion of the first step and really doesn't have a twinkle of the other steps. And ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at a hopeless alcoholic. You are looking at an alcoholic of the real hopeless variety. One who only had one purpose in life, and that was to drink, and now that is gone. I'm stripped naked. And I tell the people I sponsor, for gosh sake, I know you got to take step one, but get done with it as quickly as you can and get on with the hope. 2 weeks ago, Helen, a beautiful nurse, came in the fellowship, and she was in a setting of recovery. And she played around with that first step for 8 days and put a 44 in her mouth. People that tell me there's a whole lot in the first step without looking at the whole package. Just for me, they aren't telling you about the glory and the hope and the power of our fellowship. But I kept going to meetings, and in about my 11th or 12th month, I was at a Sunday morning meeting, and I looked in this room, and there were people that came in after me, and they were full of smiles, and they had clean eyes and clean clothes. Ladies and gentlemen, they were restored to sanity. And I looked at him and I says, you know, they're like me. If they could get restored to sanity, well, I could too. The guy next to me, he says, well, what's the next step? I says, well, is that the business of coming to believe in a power greater than yourself? And he says, that's right. Yeah. Thank God we're a fellowship, and thank God we get into an identification. Just for me, that is. I had to look you in the eye, and I had to be like you and see you get well, and I felt wellness. I got that hope in that second step. But that was about it. I'm feeling pretty checked out now. Year or two in the program, right? You can't tell me much else. I read the big book once. I'm doing the God shouting. I can tell you what's on page 83 and 84. Not too much more learning going to occur for this kid. And do you know what happens to an alcoholic when they think that way? Huh? Like the guy says, they look good on the outside, but boy, they're smelly on the inside. And I started getting smelly. And about that time, I moved across the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I'm in Virginia. And I'm getting rottener and rottener and rottener in my head and my heart. And now I don't need the program anymore either. I would just come home from work every day in my rocking chair, and I'd be rocking back and forth. And it was that little Al-Anon once again that touched my heart. She loved me enough to risk it again. She said, get the hell out of here and go to AA. I went that Tuesday night to a fire hall. A couple of years in the program, I guess. Ladies and gentlemen, I know the feeling before you take the next drink. Because that night, I was supposed to take another drink, except for the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and my loving wife. I also know something else. I didn't take that drink, and I know why some people do. Because they walk around tragic, lonely figures. They're all bottled up inside, and they stop going to meetings. They stop going to meetings. We can't hear them. We can't find out that they're hurting bad. I went to that meeting, and I told the people, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what it feels like to take a drink after 2 years, but I'm sure it's what I'm feeling right now. It was a sick meeting. It was a very sick meeting. A lot of screaming and hollering and swearing. And talk about God in that meeting. That must have been Others Anonymous. But there was a gentleman in that meeting that had never been to that meeting before. Great, big, tall, 265 pounds, 6'5", truck driving preacher by the name of Joe. He didn't say anything. He was off on the side, a tear coming down his eyes, because he wanted to be with God and he wanted to talk about God. After the meeting, I walked out and this great, big, sweaty arm come around me and he says, hey, son, how's your prayer life? I said, not good. He says, come on with me. I'm going to teach you how to pray. That's how much he loved me. Total stranger. All he knew was I was dying. This was my last night on planet Earth. He said, but first I got to introduce you to God. And I know it says in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, that our spiritual highway is broad and roomy. I know that. And I know it says that it's the God of your choosing. Also says God as we understood him. And this is how the we understands him. He's a majestic God. He's not a buddy. He said, son, you used to drink with buddies. This one here is majestic. This one here has got all the power. He said, son, infinitely greater power than that light bulb and that doorknob. He said, this one's got all the power. All the power. And later on in the steps, you read that you can have a conscious contact, and you continue to improve upon that. Son, that means this God's a personal God, not the God of your childhood. See, later on, another sponsor was to tell me, You're the kind of fellow that believed that there was a God, but you never believed in him. There's some people in this room today, I suppose, believe that President Reagan is president, but maybe they don't believe in him. And that's what it was with my God. But when you see his works of mercy, you've got to give him the job. And that's all there was to the third step. But I didn't know that because I had some old ideas in my head, you see, about how great I was yet and how little he is, or how involved he'd want to get. I found out that this God is a father unlike anything I've ever known before. This was also the time when I got right with my father, my biological father and my stepfather. I don't want to get psychological on you, but in the book it says he's the father and you're the child. Just for me, this alcoholic, the word father was a real pain in my head. And I had to get right with that word. And Joe helped me do that. And Joe would read out of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and he'd read out of that other big book too. And that's okay for me. He separated them out. He said, son, this isn't AA right here. But he says, this is what you and I are going to be walking with. Now, if you don't want it, that's okay. But he said, you've got to deal with this concept of a personal, living, loving God, because that's what's described in this big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you want what I got, why don't you try my God? And he introduced me to him, and it was beautiful. And I struggled a little bit. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to give you the name of an unapproved literature because it's just my story. I read chapter 13, The Guilt Trip, by Hal Lindsey. This was the time of my sobriety after 3 years, and Joe and I were going to have a gratitude weekend retreat. And we went up to Baltimore to get this fellow that was going to do the spiritual weekend. And as we were driving up to Baltimore, I'm reading this in the back seat of his car. And Joe's driving away, and this book talked to me about forgiveness. How much my God loved me. And I went to sleep for 3 minutes, and I woke up clean and whole and recovered. And from that day in the back of my sponsor's car until today, I have never been alone. Ever. That's absolutely remarkable. I paid thousands and thousands of dollars to try to find something like that in treatment, I guess. But I wasn't ready. And here this truck driver, he gave it to me for free. And now I'm going to give it away to other people for free. It just doesn't make sense, but it works. How you can just say, I give up. I'm going to make a decision to turn my life and my will over to your care, God. And then from then on, walk under the umbrella of his care. I'm done with my third step. Been done for a long time. Oh, I got to keep letting go of stuff and quit struggling and things like that. But see, the decision to turn my life and my will over to the care of God came on the heels of that experience with Joe in the backseat. It came on the heels of a new idea about a loving God. I could not do a third step with a God that was a joker. I couldn't do a third step. I couldn't turn my life and my will over to the care of a God that really didn't love me, that was keeping too close a track, or that wasn't in the mercy and understanding. I couldn't turn my will and my life over to that kind of God. I could do it. I could turn my life and my will over to the kind of God that Joe introduced me to. And boy, when I got the God angle down, it was hell-bent for leather and on to the next one. And I don't want anybody in this room to think that I'm perfect. Not by a long shot. He's got a lot of work on me. I have a condition that suggests I have a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of a spiritual program. And just this morning, a pretty girl come in when I was having breakfast with Helen, and I started fooling around with my reprieve. But my God didn't say, I don't want you. He says, you're still under my care. I said, that's neat. I took a 4-step in treatment to get out of treatment, ladies and gentlemen. That's a well-kept secret from counselors and directors of treatment centers. I'm sure they believe in all that rigorous honesty crap that we tell them. But just for this alcoholic, I just want to get out. Okay? Treatment center really helped me. I'd be knocking treatment centers a little bit. I don't mean to do that. That's the hand of God there too, probably. I took a 5th step again, but this time not to get out of treatment or not to save my butt, but to get right with me and God. And then it was so neat. I could get on with the rest of them, and I could get done with that stuff. You know, the first 8 step I made was a list of all the people I really owed an amend to, and then them other behinds. Well, when I was to get right with my God and not fear the power that can come from those steps, I was able to put them all down. 9th step under those conditions was rather easy, and it's unbelievable what God can do with us in a 9th step. Gee, some of the stories I heard this weekend, it would bring tears to your eyes. Huh? What God can do with us goofed up folks. A little thing like making an amend. I remember one time I had to make an amend to this dear friend that was giving me all that booze when I was a young man. I disclosed in a general way what I used to be like, what happened, what I'm like now. And we cried and we hugged. It was so beautiful. And I went home and he called me up about 6 months later. And he said, I just want to thank you for my brother's life. If it were not for your story and your amend, I wouldn't know about this disease of alcoholism. And I was able to get the right people to help my brother, and today he's alive. That's kind of neat. I just wanted to get on with life and repair. It's been so great. I thought my God was only into certain things, but I'm going to tell you, he's into whatever you want him into. Find that out and just ask for his will and the power to carry it out. And you know, I'm beyond the business of faith, I'll be honest with you. I'm into the knowing thing. I don't have faith there's a God. I know unequivocally and absolutely that he exists. Who am I to say there isn't a God? And he does such remarkable things. My wife is wanting to let me remember that it's not the big things he does, it's all the little things that he does. You know, one time, the night before payday, and we were all broke, and we'd gotten done robbing all the little piggy banks of our kids. And she said, Chuck, go on out and get some coffee. I said, fine. I looked around. There's no money in the house for coffee. And she said, well, why don't you do one of those God things? I said, yeah. I'm sorry. God, me of little faith. I didn't even get that out of my mouth. And there's a knock-knock on the door, and there's one of my pigeons. He said, I don't know why I did this, but I was driving by 7-Eleven, and I thought, hell, I've been drinking so much of your coffee, I thought I'd bring you a couple pounds of coffee. My God is so majestic. If he can get a person like me sober, he can certainly send us coffee. Thank you.